Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
This week it's a bit of a Safdie Brothers special. If you haven't heard about them, they are a fairly new filmmaking duo. They've been around for a while, but they've gotten recent recognitions, particularly for an Adam Sandler vehicle
Mhm.
called Uncut Gems. So we'll be talking about a couple of their films, to at least a couple of their more popular films, to introduce you to the filmography of the Safdie brothers, their chaotic, gritty, stress-inducing crime films featuring protagonists who are incompetent slash blinded by their own vices. In a pair of remarkable performances from Adam Sandler and Robert Pattinson
Mhm.
in Good Time, which we'll be talking about later as well. In addition, I've recommended to Isa Fong a very I I like to use this word painterly, but in this case, it's quite literally
Yeah,
painterly.
yeah.
You know,
In more
uh,
ways than one. Yeah.
a painterly lesbian romance set in 18th century France called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And Isa has recommended to me an anime called Your Lie in April about music and about terminal illness and about coping with grief. Very sad, a very heartbreaking anime. I have not seen the film though. Apparently, there's a live action film adaptation
I
of it
have
as
not
well.
seen the live action film. For reasons, right? Like just basically anime adaptation. Live action anime adaptations are hard to watch for me.
Never ends up well. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people like to blame the Americans for terrible anime live action adaptations, but truth be told, the worst live action
Uh,
adaptations of anime have been done by the Japanese.
Yeah, I mean, like they very rarely get it right. So I'm especially when a franchise ranks up as one of my favorites.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna risk tainting it by watching the live action adaptation of it unless it proves to be really good, which I don't think there's an example of that to date.
Had never exists. Like a live action anime is even rarer than a good video game adaptation, if you
Yep,
can believe that.
yep, exactly.
It is yeah, it's weird lah. But anyways, let's kick it off with the Safdie brothers. I think we'll be talking about 2019's Uncut Gems. Although if you live in Singapore, you consider it a 2020 movie because
Hmm.
it debuted on Netflix here in January this year.
Yep.
It made a bit of a splash amongst, I guess, the art house film goers amongst us, but
Yep.
I think the general population may not be aware of the Safdie brothers or Uncut Gems. And if you don't know, it's an American crime thriller. It's directed by Josh and Benny Safdie, who co-wrote the screenplay with Ronald Bronstein. It stars comedy. I use this word loosely. Legend Adam Sandler as Howard Ratner. He's a Jewish American jeweler and a gambling addict in New York City's Diamond District. The basic premise is he must retrieve an expensive gem that he purchased from Ethiopia to pay off his debts. The film also stars Lakeith Stanfield, Julia Fox, KG. Anything is possible. Kevin Garnett, Idina Menzel, and The Weeknd. Strangely enough,
Yeah.
the score was composed by 106.9, Daniel Lopatin, one of our favorite producers.
Hmm.
So a huge list of intriguing names here. And what I truly loved about Uncut Gems, slash hated about Uncut Gems, was its jittery vibe, its anxiety-inducing messiness, and what really strikes me about the Safdie brothers style, and I don't know whether you feel this way as well. It's very the looseness of it, the dialogue over dialogue, people talking over each other, the swear words, the authenticity of New York.
Yep.
That is very rare to see in film, because if you've ever been to New York, the Safdie brothers capture it perfectly, and the wavelength of his film, this particular film, is very abrasive, very deranged, and driven by this blur of movement and noise. It's a riveting high wire act that is kind of led by a spectacular performance by Adam Sandler, who
Hmm.
was playing against type. When you first watch Uncut Gems, what do you think of it?
Oh man. I think at that point in time it was picking up steam and people were a lot of accolades were going Sandler's way, right? Like
Yep.
just with his performance and all that. I found it hard to believe, right?
Mm.
That for Sandler to shine in a dramatic role, that in and of itself was made me curious enough to watch it.
Have you seen Punch Drunk Love, by the way? His previous dramatic performance?
Yes, I mean I did like him in Punch Drunk Love, but that's very different from a Safdie Brothers film.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so for him to be associated with that, and then on top of that, it's coming out on A24, right? With the whole slew of great films that have been coming out from them, from there, like I found it a bit difficult to believe. So I was curious enough to just want to see what all the noise was about,
Mm.
and it is a stellar performance, right?
Yeah.
But what I found most puzzling is that I don't think Sandler is really playing a character very far from any other character that he's played, right?
Mm.
Like it's a believable Adam Sandler character.
Yeah,
Just that,
it's just the tone of the filmmaking.
yeah,
It gives it a different vibe. Right?
yeah, it's just not funny this time round, right? Like it's just not funny. Like he could have delivered the lines in any other film, right? And it would appeal to a completely different audience, right? But there's something about the way that he plays Howard, right? And something about the way that the Safdie brothers kind of frame everything, and with the very kind of like pensive and tense and I think jittery is the right word. It's
Mm-hmm.
way in which it is told and it unfolds that completely changes the context of his performance. It will be a very interesting kind of counterpoint to compare Sandler's kind of performance here with
Robert Pattinson.
Robin Pattinson's in Good Time, because that feels like a very kind of different animal,
Mm.
in terms of the main character's performance.
Mm.
All in
Perhaps
all,
thematically similar, but yeah, different
yeah,
performances.
thematically similar. I think even visually also, like I think the Safdie brothers have very kind of like strong visual palette, right? That they're like
Distinct.
very distinct, that they like to lean into.
Mhm.
But yeah, I it's good, but I hesitate to say that I enjoyed it the first time around that I saw it.
Mhm.
Just because there is a very anxiety inducing stream of consciousness flow, right, that takes place over that, and that can get kind of frustrating, I think, for people who aren't um exposed to what the Safdie brothers style is like in general, will find it difficult to watch or annoying to watch, depending on
Mm.
what kind of moviegoer they are.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, like this is some work right here.
Mhm.
Like it's hard to ignore, as difficult it may be, or as much adjustment as it may take, right, to kind of get used to the flow of that. And seeing Sandler in such a stark role, for him, it is hard to ignore how good this actually is.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. Like what you mentioned about Adam Sandler's performance being not too different. I think the thing is, if you've ever seen Adam Sandler's comedies, he plays this kind of manic, incompetent, stupid, self-destructive kind of protagonist as well.
Yeah.
It's just that it's set in a comedic tone and you're rooting for him, right?
Yeah.
um, think about who all the antagonists are in a normal Adam Sandler film. They're the normal person, right?
Mhm.
They're normal people like us, and then they're bothered by Adam Sandler. But because we're on Adam Sandler's side, we root for him. Watching this film is like watching from the perspective of an Adam Sandler antagonist. It's like, why are you doing all this?
Yeah.
You're so stressed about his gambling habit and everything, or what he does with his family, his mistress, his fight with the Weeknd, Kevin Garnett, and Lakeith Stanfield. It's just a very combustible character driven to destructive tendencies, just trying to survive day after day.
Yep.
And it's a very impetuous creation that really captures the jittery New York City milieu, and it's a hypnotic blaster watching it come to life. This fast talking jeweler, always chasing the next big score, speeding through nearly every scene as if he's dodging bullets and mounting attacks all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite energetic filmmaking, very anxiety-inducing filmmaking, just because of its pacing,
Yeah.
the stress of the perpetual wrong decisions that he is making, and yet there is still this part of you that wants him to succeed.
Yeah, against all odds, right? Like
Yeah.
you want so much. You want to have so much to kind of hit your bets and say, nah, I don't think it's gonna happen, right? Like, but there is something about he is the underdog of his own story. right?
Mm.
And you want to root for him just because of that, because like it will end up being a very twisted kind of fairy tale for
Yeah,
that to
this is how
happen.
we win.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Like that speech to KG in his office.
yep.
Damn, like in any other film that would rank up there as far as like motivational sports speeches of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Had it been in a different film. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It really is about, and again, it falls to kind of like watching Sandler's performance, which is so good
Mm-hmm.
in a different context, and it seems so obvious after watching this film, that it could have been done, but no one has done it except the
Yeah.
Safdie brothers,
Yeah.
which is part of the brilliance of the film itself.
Yeah, man. The circumstances just keep getting worse and worse for him. And then it kind of piles up with such astonishing kinetic energy. There is a very grimy feel to it that I love, that I love in all my crime films. And it's such a confident extension of the anti-heroes found all throughout the Safdie brothers' work. Like, this is the culmination, perhaps peak Safdie brothers anti-hero protagonist.
Yeah.
Is this guy, and that finishing sequence, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the it takes place backdropped by a Boston Celtics game that I've seen. It's a real life game that actually happened.
Yeah.
I know the score for it, and yes, it still keep me at the edge of my seat watching this conference semifinal. And it was brilliant. Like, I wonder how they got the idea to set the climatic sequence to an NBA playoffs
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And in that way, it becomes an alternate history film, right?
yeah.
On a very
Well, I
small
mean,
scale.
alternate history in the sense that Ratner doesn't exist in real life, lah, but
Yeah.
the game played out how it played out, lah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an interesting backstory. I really found that very, very clever. I mean, of course, I love the basketball references and all of that, and what's
Hmm.
with Ratner's kind of obsession over it. And I mean, just seeing KG on screen in
Yeah,
this role was so bizarre,
yeah,
but so funny at the same time.
I know.
Yeah,
Apparently, initially it was supposed to be either Kobe or LeBron, but they turned it down, so KG got it instead.
interesting.
Uh,
Okay.
and I think KG works better, lah, because
Yeah,
he feels like a more. I think with Kobe and LeBron, there is an idea that they're superstars and they would never visit this Diamond District jeweler. Like, and KG is more of a street. He's from Boston. He's a
yep,
Northeast guy.
yeah.
It makes sense, lah.
Yeah, and there is something about, I think Kobe and LeBron, like as big as bigger than life than they are.
Hmm.
There's something about KG's obsession with the stone that comes across as much more believable than had it been Kobe or LeBron. Right,
Yeah.
like there's something about just the way that he approaches the stone, and the way he like caresses it, like there's a and it feeds into that the mythos of his own kind of ritualistic behavior
Hmm.
before going on the court and all of that. So I think like it was the right choice, I guess. Oh, well, not a choice because it kind of felt to him, but yeah, at the end of the day, it really is a big part of the movie, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, it Uncut Gems probably won't sit well with anyone who prefers protagonists easy to like or stories with a clean moral compass.
Hmm.
But there is a genuine, like, subversive glee involved in following Howard through his inane/insane quest for all the potential he can see around the corner, all the money he can score, and watching him set himself up for failure
Yeah.
with such conviction the whole way through. I think we get a sense that Howard is doomed from the start.
Yeah.
But the process of resisting his inevitable fate makes the kind of like his ludicrous plans infectious and easy to root for simultaneously.
Yeah. I do feel like there's a specific point in the film where you where he breaks down, right? Like that's why it's just like, maybe there's some sort of redemption out here, we're gonna see some sort, but no,
Mm.
that happens for about 30 seconds, and then he jumps into his biggest kind of
Yeah.
turn, right? Like that sets up the entire like third act of the film.
Oh
Um,
man, yeah.
yeah, so like just the twists and turns and the way that the story is told, like it's deeply uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Because you, as an audience, you're pulled every which way, right? On the one hand, you want to, keep in line with the story, but you're distracted by the way that it's told sometimes, and you want the protagonist to be a hero, but he's not.
Mm.
And like having to sit and watch all of that and kind of like settle yourself with all of that is a very different kind of cinema, I think. That is pretty unique to what the Safdie brothers are doing.
Yeah. I mean, also like you can kind of take this film on its own, lah. This kind of mesmerizing chronicle of desperate schemes by
Yep.
a low grade hustler.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like if you want to kind of read deeper into it, it's kind of this twisted version of the American dream, lah.
Yeah.
Like what the American dream initially was and what it has come to be today. The rat race, people chasing money, for no other reason than to actually get money. It's interesting. It's an interesting view of what capitalism and the American dream has become in the 21st century.
Yeah. 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 I agree with you there.
Yeah, very, very tragic comic kind of vibe lah. I loved it. I will never watch it again, but I loved it. Like this deserves at least one watch, but
Yeah.
it's not something that you watch for fun.
No, and I don't think you can rewatch it again just because of the
Mhm.
way that it pans out, right? Like once what you're getting yourself into, don't I'm not sure if there is rewatch value. You right? Like I'm not sure if you will want to willingly sit through all of that again, if
Mhm.
that's the experience that you get, or two, now that you know how it plays out,
Yeah,
whether it's worth your time.
yeah. I mean, granted, Uncut Gems is not technically a horror movie in a traditional sense,
Yeah,
but it is more harrowing and more intense than the best horror movies I've seen. Like just in terms of this like nerve shattering tension
yeah,
that just refuses to simmer. There is no like breathing room. It escalates and escalates and escalates to the point where the conclusion kind of becomes obvious, but you just I don't know, hoping against hope that it works out.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
What do you think about the score by 106 Whenever?
Um, I like the score. I feel like, okay, what's important to me a lot of the time is there are two kinds of film scores that I like. One that really kind of like uplifts a scene, right? I think about like Johan Johansson's score for like Theory of Everything, where some of the scenes just don't work without the score.
Mm,
Um, and it elevates it in that particular way. I think for Uncut Gems in particular, the fact that I didn't notice the score
mm,
as much as I thought I would, given how what a big fan I am of One of Tricks,
mm,
uh, is a testament to how good it is, right? Because it fits so well with the pacing and every scene, right? That it doesn't kind of like stand out on its own, but contributes just enough tonally to add to that kind of like
right.
jitteriness. I do feel that it's very different. Like the score for Uncut Gems felt very different from the score from Good Time, right?
Mm,
Uh, and in I mean, no pun intended, but how the music underscores every scene in Uncut Gems is brilliant on its own. Like it adds a moodiness to it. It adds a uneasiness to it that you don't notice at first
mm.
going into the scene. Like you have to kind of remember you have to I had to remind myself that, oh, like part of this feeling that I'm feeling is because the music is playing out this way.
Yeah, yeah.
uh right, because I don't think there are no standout moments for me where I'm just like, oh damn, the music here is like really really good, right? Like it's
Mm.
kind of like an undertone throughout, and that in itself is its own kind of brilliance.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I also think Adam Sandler should have at least been nominated for Best Actor at this year's Oscars. The trophy eventually went to Joaquin Phoenix, who, I mean, we had our issues with Joker, but I
Hmm.
guess he deserved the win. But
Yeah.
I mean, Adam Sandler not being nominated for this is a bit of a huge snub and kind of like devalues the Oscars for me this year, especially in this category.
Yeah.
It's a bit sad, man. But I mean, great. Love the cast of untrained actors as well, which the Safdies are very prone to hiring. They
Hmm.
like to hire untrained actors to give it a kind of sense of realism, gritty authenticity to it. Julia Fox is not an actress. Kevin Garnett obviously is not an
Yeah.
actor. The Weeknd is not an actor, and yet they all played their parts authentically. Like
Yeah.
they are who they are. It's almost like watching a documentary rather than a film lah. And
Uh-huh.
I felt very propulsed by it. It's like it's almost like watching a nature documentary. It's almost anthropological in a sense.
Yeah.
Despite the very kind of psychedelic score and some of the psychedelic visuals when you go into the gems and stuff like that, it does feel very real. It's like watching a documentary about the deer or antelope in the
Yeah.
savannah, right? And like you see the fucking cheetah behind, and then like the deer just doesn't know that death is impending and keeps making terrible decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
great.
that's a great kind of term to use to describe the Safdie Brothers' work, right? Is anthropological thrillers.
Yeah.
And yeah, that basically kind of sums it up. Uh, yeah. Any
Man.
any kind of like additional thoughts with that? Uncut Gems, of course, right now is on Netflix.
Yes.
For anybody who wants to spend like 2 hours and a dime, feeling uncomfortable.
If you feel that your life is going too well right now,
Yeah.
or perhaps if you feel like your life is going badly, and you want in a Schneiderfruit sense to watch someone's life go even worse than yours, Uncut Gems might actually be a release because at least you're like, I'm not Howard Ratner.
I do feel there is a lot of catharsis watching this.
Yeah.
Right, because of just the way it builds, throughout the thing, and the kind of ending that you get at the end. Like, there is a release when you're done,
Hmm.
and that, given the times that we're living in, might not be such a bad thing.
Correct. Yeah. Speaking of also on Netflix, the Safdie Brothers' previous film, 2017's Good Time, also on Netflix. A lot less hyped than Uncut Gems is, and I for one was very disappointed lah by the lack of attention that Good Times had. Because. Since 2017, I had been like singing the praises of this film, saying that it's one of the best crime thrillers out there, saying that if you think of Robert Pattinson still as Edward, go and watch Good Time. Of course, I mean Robert Pattinson has since shed that typecast. He's been in a bunch of very adventurous roles. In The Lighthouse being one of them, Cosmopolis, High Life, and things like that. But Good Time was the first time like I saw him break out as this very adventurous indie actor,
Mhm.
and man, Good Time is one of my favorite crime thrillers out there. I think I enjoy Good Time more than Uncut Gems. What about you?
Um, it's very different, right? They're
Mm,
two very kind of different monsters. Um, I, okay. I think the only point in time where I feel like Uncut Gems stands out for me is with the ending, right?
yep.
Good Time is a great film, uh, but I didn't quite get the ending that I wanted.
Mm,
But at the same time, it makes perfect sense. Like, it's the perfect ending for the film, but it wasn't the ending that I wanted, or the kind of ending that I wanted. And that's kind of like my only complaint. But it's a very subjective complaint,
mm-hmm.
uh, in and of itself. Like, it is, um tonally, and visually, it feels very similar to Uncut Gems. and
Yep.
and and just bear in mind that I watched Good Time after I watched Uncut Gem. Yeah,
Stress.
yeah. Not so much kind of like back to back, but just in terms of chronologically how I watched it. So
Mm,
my introduction to the Safdie Brothers is Uncut Gems and not Good Time,
mm-hmm.
and therefore, like, that kind of became the point of reference for me in terms of their body of work.
All right.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think, like, this, like you said, if you want to see what Pattinson is capable of, like, there's so much range, right? Just from his portrayal of Constantine here, Connie
Yeah.
here. um the, it's such a compelling look at what he can do. It is one of the few, not one of the few. I think this is one of the biggest cases for you to just forget like that Twilight ever existed for him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he is a powerhouse actor and he can carry the entire movie on his own. It's quite nuts.
Agreed.
How
Yeah.
good and how much range he shows just for this one character.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can't stop watching him, right? It's an amazing kind of like train wreck, much in the same way Uncut Gems is. But I feel like um, Pattinson has a much stronger performance than Sandler because Pattinson here literally carries the entire story,
Mm.
and it is a tour de force that isn't like Adam Sandler playing himself in a different context, right? Like this is a totally different Robert Pattinson that most people would have seen, outside of him and all the recent stuff that he's done recently. If you haven't seen any of that,
Mm.
like Good Time is a great place to start, just because you kind of get lost in his world, uh, in Connie's world, in Good Time, and you don't even know it, right? You're just kind of like swept up, um, you know, uh, much like the Crystal, the girl in the movie, gets swept up with the way that he talks and the way that he like, it kind of spins everything to his own kind of like narrative.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. If you're unaware, Pattinson, he plays, as you mentioned, Connie, lah, who is like a lower income queen's hoodlum, I guess is the word,
yeah.
who wants to help his mentally challenged brother, Nick, played by director Benny Safdie himself. He convinces him to team up to rob a bank. The heist is successful, but soon after, the cops arrest Nick, forcing Connie to come up with an impromptu plan to free him. Lah. So the plot description suggests a rather straightforward crime narrative, but the brilliance of the Safdie's film lies in its kind of sharp eye for detail.
Mhm.
It's kind of very casually inventive storytelling, like learning that Nick is in hospital due to a brutal jail beating. The brother improvises a way to get him out. The first of several instances in which Connie displays an uncanny intelligence and an ability to stay cool in a tense situation,
Yep.
yet still being able to fuck up monumentally. And it's one of those like dualities, right? Like
Yeah.
like same thing with Howard Ratner, right? Like he is clearly resourceful and smart, like he knows what he's doing.
Yep.
It's just that the situations that he gets himself in like shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Mhm.
And the Saudis repeatedly throw unexpected obstacles in his path, including one twist that is better not to know before seeing the film.
Yeah.
And because like the film doesn't really reveal much of Connie's backstory. So Pattinson himself must embody a kind of this lifetime's worth of anxiety and scrappiness in just look and action.
Mhm.
And I think the actor really rises to the challenge. He effortlessly conveys his he feels like he feels edgy, like a drowning rat. You
Yep.
know.
Yep.
He's a grubby thief, but he's also smart and resourceful, and emerges as an unlikely rooting interest, much like how Redner is. And much of the pleasure of Good Time comes from watching the character navigate through the different perils, whether it's this innocent 16-year-old played by Talia Webster, who he finds, or a recent parolee who he encounters with some ill-gotten money. There is a lot of twists and turns that you don't expect with it.
Mhm.
But I never felt at any one point that it felt implausible.
Yeah.
Um, it kind of throttles with a desperate, grungy velocity, and Robert Pattinson's raw performance, which is just full of like gutter urgency. It's very powerfully immersive, and it kind of embodies the Safdie Brothers style once again.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. Okay, Good Time is a comedy of errors with none of the comedy.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, like it's structured in totally in that way, but with none of the comedy whatsoever. And it is amazing to see Pattinson's character get thrown curveball after curveball and how quickly he reacts to that.
Mhm.
And how quickly like it feels so natural to see him make that turn,
Mhm.
every single time. And yeah, it's just so good. It's a bit sad that we can't talk about. We would to spoil some of the turns here would definitely be to spoil the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just all around like kind of great performance. And we were talking about the soundtrack. I think like the soundtrack is much more um evident in Good Time. I think
Mm-hmm.
the track that One Tricks does with Iggy is fantastic. Just like at which point in time it's used in the film as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I really really like Good Times. I just okay. Let's talk about how did you find the ending for this? Right, we don't have to say exactly how it ended, but like in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how did you feel? It felt really sudden for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that felt very unsatisfying. Right, to have followed him, kind of like step by step all the way through all these like twists and turns, and like you said, right, like a drowning rat, like just scurrying to the next kind of like safe ground.
Mm-hmm.
But for it to have ended the way that it ended felt so meh, to
Mm.
me. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, having seen the Safdie brothers prior to Good Time, even then, like they like to take their crime stories to their logical conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
often to the dissatisfaction of the audience,
Yep.
because the point of their stories is, I mean, as gritty as the stories are, truly the point of the stories is crime doesn't pay.
Yep.
It is a very you their films are so immoral, and it blows my mind that their essential message is actually a moral one.
Mm-hmm.
You do these things, you get what's coming to you, like, and the protagonist for all his films, from Howard Ratner to Robert Pattinson here, they get what's coming to them. Nothing turns out well,
Yeah.
regardless of all their ingenious schemes and plans. I thought that it was a logical conclusion, intentionally dissatisfactory,
Yep.
but it it's like it's like what happens with Omar in The Wire. Again, I don't want to spoil it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if you have seen The Wire, you know how it ends for Omar. And there is a certain unsatisfactory nature to it, but there is a certain realism in why it happened and how it happened that keeps the authenticity of the vibe of this film and David Simon's show. So I appreciated that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So you watched it on Netflix recently. And if once again, if you want to watch the Safdie Brothers this filmography, they're all available on Netflix actually, and you can go even further back. They have a lot of movies prior to Good Time and Uncut Gems. I'm just pointing out Good Time because Robert Pattinson is the new Batman.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a lot of a lot of controversy and a lot of debate over whether he should be Batman. I mean, I've never had that lah. I mean, I've seen his recent work, so I'm very confident that Rob Pattinson is one of the more one of the best actors of this generation.
Yeah.
So I'm very cool with that. And if you want to be convinced of Robert Pattinson's talent, Good Time and The Lighthouse
Yeah.
and everything else are great examples of
I
of
think
his
after
genius.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think after watching Good Time, I'm a bit more concerned, not so much about Pattinson like tainting Batman's legacy, but kind of like Batman's tainted legacy
Mm-hmm.
affecting, Pattinson, because like such a great actor, such a great actor, and I don't want him to kind of end up like so many of the other actors who have played Batman.
I mean, I feel bad for Ben Affleck, who did an okay, fine Batman.
Yeah.
It's just fandom is hard to please.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of the great directors of our current generation, um, have been destroyed by fandom,
Yeah.
by comic book fandom. I think Ryan Johnson is a great example of this. John Boyega, Daisy Ridley, and people who are involved in like these big things
Yeah.
that are not high art. They're doing it for the paycheck, and then their careers get destroyed because comic book fans are just impossible to please lah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that being said, right, like, because of the nature of the Safdie Brothers film, I actually really want them to do a big screen adaptation of Wile E. Coyote, because all his protagonists are essentially Wile E. Coyote, right? They're
Yeah.
hunting something, and then like this insane comedy of errors and misfortunes happen upon them.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, they're all like live action Wile E. Coyotes in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That would be. Well, I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, man.
We'll put it on the list of things that we want to see happen.
The next topic that I recommended to Isa is I wanted him to like chill after Good Time
Uh,
and Uncut Gems. You
yeah.
know, it's like, I mean, this is not like an easy or breezy film by any means, lah.
No,
But like relative to the Safdie Brothers, it's a bit chiller.
it's
It's a bit more contemplative and meditative and artistic,
yeah,
you know, things like that. Yeah.
yeah.
It is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a French film that competed for the Palme d'Or at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival. I personally saw it in late 2019 at the Singapore International Film Festival. And it blew my mind. It's one of my favorite French films in a while.
Mm,
It follows. It's directed by Celine Sciamma, written by her as well. It's a historical romantic drama, starring Naomi Merlant and Adele Haenel. It's set in France in the late 18th century, and it tells the story of a forbidden affair between an aristocrat and a painter who's commissioned to paint her portrait, her
mhm.
wedding portrait, I might add, to an arranged marriage that she doesn't want to get involved in. The painter and the subject fall in love. What do you think about Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
It touches a very different part of the emotional spectrum
Mm-hmm,
than the first two movies that we discussed. When you say that it's painterly, like you're not kidding at all. I mean, sure, it's it's in the title that it's part of the story and all of that, but it is so beautiful.
mm-hmm,
Just the way the palette, the literal color palettes, the way that light it's um the cinematography is breathtaking so much of the time, and in this kind of quiet contemplativeness of love uh and beauty and art and all of these like gorgeous things, right? And the way that it's framed, it feels a lot like a painter considering an object before he paints it or before she paints it in this particular case.
mm-hmm.
And I really really enjoyed that, right? Like I watched this shortly after the going through good times, and it really like that kind of like emotional contrast and tonal contrast really
Mm-hmm.
um it is hard to describe how beautiful this film is in so many ways.
Yeah.
It is such a different take, I think, on the idea of forbidden love. And I kind of immediately think about comparing it to Blue is the Warmest Color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which in and of itself, kind of like thematically kind of similar, the whole idea of two women in love, but like captured in a very, very, very different way.
Mm-hmm.
And Portrait of a Lady on Fire is by far like one of my favorite romance movies of recent times, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It is to me the antithesis of Love at First Sight.
Yeah.
Love at First Sight is a fairy tale fantasy. This is the story of love at umpteenth sight.
Mm.
It's for 2 hours. The film's characters, the two women, who meet on the edge of society and propriety, never stop studying each other. That's all they do. They study each other.
Yeah.
Their eyes sweep across candlelit rooms and wind-swept cliffs, all beautifully captured cinematography, and the increasing intensity of their gaze and kind of the simmer of their passions melt the barriers between them, lah.
Yep.
So it's really, this French film is really about seeing someone, like truly seeing someone.
Mhm.
The process of discovery that only begins with the first look and then intensifies with more looks. Like what we are watching is a very mutual and gradual seduction. And it seduces the audience as well, like drawing
Mm.
us into the striking vividness of the imagery, the quiet patience of the storytelling. It takes like the plot almost even doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
um yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And one of the most sumptuous and rapturous love stories I've seen in a long time, and I think both actresses really captured that well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
hands down. It's so. What amazes me is that, given its quiet, kind of contemplative nature for large swaths of the film, right, the pacing is perfect. Because I think like a lot of the space that is given, and the pace that it is given is very much rewarded. And but not rewarded in a way like most people would think like romance is rewarded. Maybe they get to make love, or there's some kind of like joyous kind of celebration. There's none of that, right? Like, so much of it just ends up being the opportunity to be intimate with one another, right? Like, that is its own reward, and the audience feels that as well, right? Like, you have this tension kind of like building throughout all these really kind of like quiet scenes, and it leads into a moment of communion, of intimacy, and that cycle keeps repeating itself to in growing intensity throughout the film, and it creates a very different kind of like reward um structure for the audience that is very rare, to have like that kind of scenery chewing at the same
Mhm.
time having such a beautiful pace at the same. It's really quite marvelous.
Yeah, I mean, with such a restraint, at least dialogue-wise, a restraint. It's not restrained cinematographically,
Mm,
like it's beautifully shot. But watching this kind of restrained blossoming of infatuation, the private motives of stolen glimpses and wandering eyes and stuff like that, the yearning that is in every scene. Plays like this, all the voyeuristic close-ups and all that, it's
yeah.
a very great courtship.
Hmm.
It's a great two-hander. It makes the drama very intense. There's electrifying chemistry between both leads, unspoken at first, and until it finally isn't. In fact, I actually think the first consummation of that romance is verbal, not physical.
Mm,
It's an exchange of intimate observations.
yeah.
The kind of tics of personality that only that only the besotted notice.
Hmm.
It's like as sexy as any sex scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And Celine Sciamma really is brilliant in capturing that. As she is brilliant in capturing the period elements of it. Like
Hmm.
we're also invited to luxuriate in the low light and the routines of another era and experience that era's more deliberate pace, like the kind of the way the minutes pass on to one another. A more slower pace of life,
Yeah.
but the soul of the film is definitely modern. Also,
Hmm.
being a lesbian romance, lah.
Yeah. Some of my favorite scenes take place in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Just like the low light and like the slight flicker of the fire, and these hushed tones as these women just kind of like share their day,
Mm-hmm.
and their experiences. So compelling.
Yep.
Uh, just to kind of feel that to be let into that secret quiet space, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they share. Yeah, so good, so good.
Yeah, I really want to talk about my favorite moment in the film, which is also coincidentally my favorite musical cue of 2019.
Oh.
The moment comes just a little past the halfway mark of the film. Mariette and Eloise, the two leads, have yet to acknowledge their growing desire.
Yeah.
Then they are brought to an evening gathering of women who live in an isolated island.
Hmm.
The two soon-to-be lovers kind of exchange glances across a bonfire, and then this slow chant starts to rise as the rest of the women gather to sing.
Hmm.
The song grows, the clapping starts, and then they begin to repeat a chanted lyric. It's hard to describe the magic of this musical moment,
Yeah.
but it's so beautiful. It's kind of like it induces you into a trance-like state.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to describe it. You just have to watch it, man. It's my favorite musical moment of last year.
It is so incredibly powerful. I loved it, and I just kind of like want to counterpoint that with the musical moment that you get near the end,
Mm,
right? With Vivaldi at the end. Like, on the one hand, you have this amazing kind of like wellspring of music and humanness that comes from these women coming together in a chorus.
yeah.
Much like mirroring their love, right? Their growing love for each other, and then at the end with the Presto from Summer by Vivaldi, at that one last scene as a kind of like forward momentum, that you can't stop, right? Like life has taken over, and you're just going to be dragged along by it,
Hmm.
right, in the heat of life. Like those two moments are just stunning.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really, really are.
Yeah, man. Like I've been watching. I haven't rewatched the film recently, but I have been rewatching that particular scene on YouTube a lot.
Mm,
Just because I loved it, and as well as the ending cue too. Brilliant stuff. I really feel like a lot of people seem to be intimidated or bored by period dramas. I do have to say that if you have to make an exception for this one,
yeah.
because it's one of the, particularly it's not in English, you have to read subtitles. I
Uh-huh.
know a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like period dramas, especially long lingering romances.
Yeah.
But this is probably the best done that I've seen in a long time.
It's there is so much here to
Mm.
kind of like take in that it's never boring,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and you were given one in time. I mean, like the amount of emotion and meaning and that can be packed into a single look from any one of these actresses, right, is like astounding.
yeah, man. Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It kind of completes romantic and creative pursuits into one.
Hmm.
Kind of arguing for a curiosity, a genuine interest in the deeper truth of whatever you're fixated upon, whatever your artistic subject is.
Yep.
And it's brilliant. It uses the painting as a metaphor.
Yep.
And it's able to create a lot of layers of meaning,
Hmm.
straight up to its all timer of an ending, a supernova of feeling expressed and provoked. Brilliant stuff. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is available on all VOD platforms, iTunes, Amazon, and stuff like that. If you want to watch it, or if you're in America, you can watch it on Hulu as well.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, man. Any concluding thoughts before we move on?
No, I just highly, highly recommend it. I think like in preparing for this particular episode and the stuff I had to watch, like um I was definitely Portrait of a Lady on Fire is my favorite.
Hmm.
Uh, it is it is a rare gem that comes like once in a blue moon. I feel,
Yeah, man.
and I really, really enjoyed it and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, same. Speaking of musical cues and love stories, Your Lie in April is entirely that. Would you like to give a little synopsis of Your Lie in April before we discuss it?
Yeah. So Your Lie in April, we follow piano prodigy Kosei Arima, who at a young age starts to dominate, music competitions and becomes somewhat of a name, right, amongst child musicians. But at the same time, his upbringing is wrapped in a lot of controversy. His mother Saki, I mean, I think Tiger Mom is kind of
Yeah.
is a bit of an understatement, right? So she herself is a a piano teacher, and somewhat of a failed aspiring, pianist herself, and
Hmm.
a lot of that has, as they tend to be, a lot of that has been projected onto to Kosei,
Yeah.
right? And he struggles with trying to please his mother and being the best possible, um, pianist that he could possibly be. When she dies, he has a mental breakdown while performing at a piano recital, and it results in him losing his ability to hear the sound of his piano
Hmm.
uh, while he's playing it, right? And that's kind of like where the story begins.
Yeah.
um we Most of what I've just talked about, like, you kind of discover through a lot of flashbacks.
Mm.
So a couple of years later, Kosei is still struggling with this particular problem, right? He hasn't touched the piano, and his world is kind of bleak ever since losing his ability to hear himself playing the piano. And he has resigned himself to a very different kind of life from what he had as a child just 2 years back.
Yeah.
um, and one fine day, as with many anime, a girl appears suddenly and changes everything in his life. He
Mm.
meets Kaori, who is a free spirit in many senses of the word, a 14-year-old violinist whose playing style reflects just the audaciousness of her personality. and she makes it her goal to help Kosei return to the music world, and shows him what she believes music to be. That it should be free and not as structured as the music that he grew up learning under his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as they continue to kind of like get to know each other and go on like these little very very heartwarming kind of adventures, they end up performing together, and that's kind of like the twist in all of that, where he discovers that Kosei discovers that Kaori actually has an illness, right? That she's never told him before. So I won't go past that, but that essentially is the main part of the story. I think there's a lot that we don't want to spoil about how things play out. That being said, Hitz and I were just talking about it before we started recording, and it's pretty easy to telegraph what happens, I think, but that doesn't change the fact that Yola in April ranks up there as one of the biggest anime cry fest that we've had in recent times. I mean, it's not that recent. Wait, this was
early 2010s, 2013 or 14.
Yeah, I think it started airing 2014, right? So it was still some time ago, but like it's a really really sad anime, but one that ultimately speaks of hope, right? The very young ages of its characters and the innocence as they go about their lives and learn about each other and what living is about and what music is about and what art is about and what love is about at these kind of tender formative ages, lends a very sweet yet melancholic tone to everything that the anime touches on, and it also makes ultimately the whole story both tragic and touching at the same time. So what do you feel about watching Your Lie in April?
Firstly, this is a bit of a more esoteric in terms of like other people may not get this, but it felt to me like a sequel to Whiplash, in a sense that like this could be like Whiplash 2, where Miles Teller meets a girl and then the girl tries to tell him that no, music is not like how J.K. Simmons tells you. It's not meant to be structured and clinical and precise and technical. It's meant to be expressive and joyful and emotive, right? So like the first thing that struck me was Whiplash 2.
Honestly, yeah, I'm sure that could very well be the case. Like it has all the hallmarks and traumas of Whiplash, right? But it just plays out in a very very different way. Sure.
But at the end of the day, this show is about music, sure, but the music, much like the painting, is a metaphor for various things. Basically, the lead character dealing with his trauma. He has a very complex relationship with music and a very complicated relationship with his mother, which is brought on by terminal illness. His complex relationship with music extends to his new love interest, Kaori, who similarly has a terminal illness also, but teaches him a new way to express himself musically. This is a very dichotomous exploration of terminal illness and one's relationship with music. How it not only affects the one suffering from the disease, but also everyone else related to the person. It has a great love triangle or quadrangle, should I say? It has a great love quadrangle, also, except like his playboy best friend doesn't really know. I mean, we know from the start that Corey is not really interested in him. But I guess it's a love quadrangle. It's really good, and just the fact that you learn early on that Corey has a terminal illness, his violinist love interest, and therefore the ending is telegraphed, doesn't negate the emotional journey that comes along with it, because it's quite profound. A similar underlying theme for all the previous three topics that we've been talking about is the ability to telegraph the ending. Because with Uncut Gems, Good Time, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it's not going to end well. but despite all that, the journey is still fulfilling and worthwhile, and exciting and surprising. And it's the same with your light in April. The meaning of the title will become obvious at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the depiction of uh, the lead's complicated relationship with his mother, who it I mean, she feels monstrous. Like, she is
Yeah.
downright abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thing is, right? Like, I don't know whether her mother is redeemable character wise. I felt like, man, like, that was a monster, like, and what she did to a
Yeah.
child is monstrous, you know.
Yeah.
She was the one who made him, withdrawn and shy and traumatized and fucked up his relationship with what should be a very joyful experience.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to play music. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's a prodigy and all. Destroyed his career, destroyed his self-esteem. And Kaori on her own, that relationship with him is also very complex, because he kind of equates Kaori with his mother, two figures that he dearly loves,
Yeah.
but has to let go eventually,
Mm-hmm.
for natural reasons, due to terminal illness. It's sad and heartbreaking, but also very beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Again, I think like a lot of the gravitas of the story has to do with the fact that they're so young.
Mm.
Having to deal with these things in your early teens, right? Is uh it's hard. It's hard, right? Like I think especially for Kose's relationship with his mother, it's something that he's not going to be able to completely unravel until he's much older, or at least I hope he does, right? If we were to project into the future of this anime character,
Right. Yeah.
um, that and the mom simply just can't be redeemed because she dies, right? She dies
Yep.
early on, and there's no way to kind of like fix that.
Mm.
And I think that is the major difference between Kozi's mother and his relationship with Kaori later on. That both are instances where he has to grapple with um losing someone that he loves, and in the latter case, like knowing that he's going to lose someone that he loves,
Mm.
and how he grows kind of like from that. But it is again like there's an innocence to the characters and just how young they are that lends so much weight to the way things turn out.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, like there's a hopefulness to it that I think in my long list of like uh enemies to cry to, I think like this is by far one of the more hopeful ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Um.
just going to take a second to talk about
Mm.
the music scenes here, especially the performative competition style music scenes that we get in this series, right? Because a lot of the what we see is kind of on stage in front of an audience and all of that. So good, so good.
Mm.
I would put it up there with watching some of the best like animated sports moments in anime. Like your
Mm.
Hanabado or your Haikyuu or
Mm.
your Yuri on Ice, right?
Mm.
Just like some of the performances that they've managed to animate, um, quite breathtaking. And they gave me the same kind of feeling, as like kind of match point during Hanabado's like final match.
Right.
Like it's so good, and it's something that is so rare, I think, especially when we're talking about music related anime.
Mm.
Um, by and large, I don't think I've consumed that much music related anime. I mean, you have things like Beck and all the slew of like band slash idol related animes that continue to be extremely popular. But I think
Carol and Tuesday most recently.
Karen Tuesday most recently for sure. I
Yeah.
think this was my first kind of foray into something that dealt with classical music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really really well done. Like each piece that they choose and the way they choose to portray each piece
Yeah.
really is like outstanding in terms of an um, in terms of the animation and the pacing and the artwork itself that accompanies the music.
Mm.
Interesting thing of note as well is that oh man, I can't remember their name. That these two violin guys that like do satire videos on YouTube.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so they've actually praised Your Lie in April for being remarkably
Mm,
realistic in terms of the way, like the fingering of the violin and the playing of the piano and all of that.
mhm.
Like the attention to detail there seems to be pretty realistic according to them. So, another plus 10 points there.
Yeah, man. I think emotionally, musically, this anime checks all the boxes for me, lah.
Yeah.
The depiction of Kusei's trauma is one of the best I've seen and one of the most realistic,
Mm.
especially in a sense that this mental block that he has isn't magically resolved by the end.
Yep.
He's on the way to growing out of it.
Yep.
But it shouldn't be so easily overcome, Kaori or not.
Yeah.
And I also loved on the flip side, like Kaori's um, approach to her own impending death is completely opposite. Instead of uh, instead of kind of trying to provide for someone else, she kind of leads a very happy-go-lucky life, lah. While at the same time trying to help Kusi at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's really beautifully told, and also this tragic love story between two damaged teens brought together by their love of music and performance. The themes, they range from music to terminal illness and child abuse, and even the child abuse themes is a bit complex
Yep.
because I guess I understand why Kusei's mother does what she does.
Yeah.
It's very, it's understandable. I mean, obviously, I'm not condoning child abuse, but I get her motivations
Mm-hmm.
and why she went too far in trying to train Kusei. It is it's far deeper and more emotional than most anime that I watch,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of touch upon love stories and emotional trauma in a very surface way, like a very oh, this is your backstory and that's just it, and you don't really explore the nuances of that backstory.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's also very, like, visually and orally stunning, like, as you mentioned. It's beautifully animated. The score is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever the real pianists and violinists are that do the music for the show are very talented people. Classical prodigies are in their own right. Yeah, man. The the stuff that in terms of the music competition,
Yep.
I really got into it as well. Kusei's rivals too
Mm-hmm.
are actually quite richly drawn. I really like both their rivals, the girl and the guy. I forgot their
Mm-hmm.
names. Yeah, like wonderful character work here, lah.
Yep.
Rare to see great character work in, I guess, competition anime, you would say.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they are set up as foils as far as they can be foils in an anime like this, right? But they're given, they've got a fair amount of personality. They've got a good amount of backstory, right? You get a peek into what their lives are actually like, and they share a very complex relationship with Kosei as well.
Mm,
That intertwines with his past, and like that's rare, right? Like it's so easy just to have like a nameless kind of faceless, like another child prodigy,
mm.
just appear out of nowhere to move the plot forward. But they don't take that shortcut, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Top to bottom, from every angle that this anime approaches, the love story, the musical aspects, the rivalry aspects, the competition aspects, it's all like magnificently done. Kaori is a great character. That in the beginning it might be easy to dismiss her as a manic pixie trope,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
before you dive into her story. So I think I would suggest that before you kind of dismiss her as a trope, which anime actually does a lot,
Yep.
maybe wait until you see her story lah, and her reasonings and stuff like. Because she's not just the bright girl that is supposed to fix the broken guy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's more to it than that. Like, in fact, on the flip side, she is broken herself. She has her own issues that are independent of Kusei, that are just as compelling as Kusei's issues.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved Kusei's childhood friend as well. She I think more than even Corey or Kusei, I was kind of rooting for her as the underdog in the love
Yeah.
triangle.
Yeah.
Like, she was never going to win, but like
Yeah.
that's why she's a great underdog lah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that. It it's how nuanced the relationships are here.
Mm.
I think a lot of the time we get a lot of anime, kind of like this slice of life, like high school era anime, right?
Yeah.
That kind of like steamrolls through a lot of the things that an anime like Your Life in April intentionally slows down to take a look at.
Mm.
And seems to be kind of like a similar, with Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Your Lie in April, amazing shows and film that provides a nice relief to the stress and anxiety of Uncut Gems and Good Time.
Yeah.
All great in your own respects, but like if you would like something to calm yourself down after the Safdie Brothers, that's why we're kind of pairing this to. At least that's why I decided to kind of like pair Portrait with the Safdie Brothers. I was unaware that the Your Lie in April was going to be like this, but they seem like perfect balances for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Should,
Your Lie in April is available on Netflix as well.
the live action film is also available on Netflix.
Oh,
Although I don't
is
know.
it?
I don't know how good it is.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna hold off. Maybe someday I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
I will say, however, that I wouldn't be surprised if eventually it gets picked up as a K drama.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
it
all the
it
K-drama
will
boxes.
totally change the story, I think. But like it does tick a lot of boxes for like a modern day K drama.
Agreed. Yeah. Your Lie in April can be viewed for free on Netflix. Not for free lah, but I mean, if you have Netflix, you can view it. It's also available on Crunchyroll and Hulu if you're in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of places to watch it. It's actually a very quick watch. It's 12, 20. I don't know how many episodes. 26, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like 20 minutes, 26 episodes. Is it 26 episodes? Wait, let me just double check that. Yes. 22 episodes actually.
22 episodes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
22 episodes.
Worth every one of them. There are no filler episodes in this one. You
Yeah.
know, there's no like flashback episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally worth your time. All of these are like super highly recommended this month. Hopefully you check them out. You know. In fact, all of them are available on Netflix, right? Or except for Portrait of a Lady on
Yeah,
Fire,
that's a
which is
portrait.
a bit, which is available on whatever VOD platforms that you prefer, lah.
Yeah.
Man. Next week we'll be talking about three different things. Our main topic is a very controversial cartoon called the Boondocks.
Is it still controversial?
Yeah, like especially more so now in the PC era. Where we kind of look back on Aaron Magruder's radical, controversial, hilarious satire of African American culture. It began as a comic strip in newspapers and it became a very adult oriented cartoon. How it differs from a lot of black comedies is that it doesn't poke at white America.
Yep.
It pokes at black America in terms of like he's trying to point out his own society, his own community's dysfunctions and caricatures and make fun of them and try to make you aware of the different issues plaguing the black community that is not related to white people. It's related to themselves. And it's something that Dear White People tried to do in season 3, but I think the Boondocks has a much better take on it and it's still relevant today. Episode 2 about R. Kelly weirdly has like stood the test of time. Like till today, like we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll also be talking about Netflix's unbelievable sexual assault drama, starring Caitlin Denver, Toni Collette, and Merritt Weaver, and also a unique fantasy. Not really. I mean, there's fantasy elements.
Yeah.
Fantasy anime about economics and commerce called Spice and Wolf. Very interesting. The most unique anime I must say I've ever seen because it delves so deep into economic concepts that I had Wikipedia open next to me. So I was constantly pausing and looking up certain trade or commerce ideas to fully get the idea of the plans that they were hatching.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that next week. I thought it was a bit of a spicy pick for me. Like I really, really enjoy Spice and Wolf. And it was Um, I don't think it's for everyone, but I think people who give it a chance will be very, very surprised by what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be back next week on the 24th. Yeah, till then, this has been Hit Zero.
This is Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.